All right, welcome. Thanks for attending this live stream about some of the work we've been doing and helping out with on Drupal CMS and Olivero, the default theme. Got Jen Witkowski and Alycia Jones from Lullabot, and we have Mike Herchel coming in at some point. We still think, but he'll drop by and be fashionably late. We hope. So yeah, if just some housekeeping. If you have any questions, just use the Q&A section, and we will get to as many as we can. This is also being live streamed on YouTube, so you can also reach it there if you prefer that format. And with that, I will turn it over to Jen.
Hey, hello. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to give a little bit of background to this project. Let me see here. Share screen. See here. There you go. I hope everybody's seeing some sort of Figma slide. Cool. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. My name is Jen Witkowski. I'm an associate design director with Lullabot, and we have Alycia Jones here. I'm going to have her also give an introduction. But we were both UI designers on this project when it came to modifying Olivero for Drupal CMS. So we're going to talk a little bit about the design background, some of the content types and component work that we did. And if Mike is able to join us, he is going to talk about some of the front-ender stuff that he did. He was a front-end lead on this. So some of the background on this. Basically, a new design system for Experience Builder couldn't be built in time for Experience Builder's initial release. So the Drupal CMS leadership team decided to use Olivero as a temporary solution until a design system could be created and built. Some advantages of this is that Olivero already existed in Drupal, so it had an existing design system, and it included built-in design patterns and had some components already that existed with it. But it was still missing some stuff. So it needed design and support for new content types that would have to be supported for Experience Builder. And these new content types also introduced new components that needed to be designed and implemented. Some constraints with this project. It was a super tight deadline. The goal was to reuse patterns and styles that were already established in Olivero and introduce something new only if it was completely necessary. I think it was like the end of October of when we were approached about this project. And then I think it was January when it actually had to launch. And that included design and development, both crammed into those month and a half, 2 months. So eventually, there were also some other constraints. Eventually, this whole thing would get sunset once the design system for Experience Builder was introduced. So we didn't want to spend a ton of time designing for something that would eventually be thrown away. But this also helped us brainstorm some ideas for how we can improve Olivero in the future, which is great. So we have a lot of things that we came up with that we kind of like put in the backlog of like, hey, we'll revisit this someday, but it won't be for Experience Builder. So I'm going to review the priority guides and content types that we created for Olivero for Drupal CMS. And Alycia is going to review some of the component work that we did. So I'm going to zoom out here my Figma. Hopefully I won't make anybody sick as I swim through my Figma. So I'm going to start with this thing that was created called priority guides. And what priority guides are is it's basically an alternative to a wireframe. So work for this initial content types for Drupal CMS was first presented as priority guides. There's an issue related to this, and we'll share this issue. Not sure if we the chat right now, but we will get this link out to you, this Drupal issue. Meg Plunkett is a strategist from Lullabot. She helped lead this initiative with creating these priority guides. So, and as I mentioned before, priority guides are an alternative to wireframes. It takes a content first with a strong focus on providing best values to the user. There is a great article that Alycia released that talks through priority guides and what they are, and we'll also share that link to that article to you. So we use priority guides instead of wireframes because they emphasize content hierarchy and user needs and avoid discussions around UI. They're also lower fidelity and faster to modify than wireframes. So as you can see here, we have a priority guide for the content type event. Everything that is highlighted in a red outline are fields that are required. So I'm just going to scroll down here to show everybody what this priority guide looks like. And so, yeah, we had these priority guides that were already created. And so what we did is we brought them into Figma. And what we did is we started to align them to the content types that Olivero didn't support quite yet that we needed to design for. Some of these content types, I would say most of these content types are based off of the article content type that already existed in Olivero. So you'll see some similar patterns. And we just rearranged things and maybe introduced some new type styles where we needed to. So this is the events content type. As you can see here, it looks pretty similar to the article content type. The only thing that we really introduced with this is we added some different text styles to indicate date and location and an area for a map. The next content type is project case study. As you can see here, we have title, description, and body were all required. Again, this pretty closely mimics the article content type already in Olivero. It even uses the same image alignment options, as you can see here for left and right aligned images. The only thing that we really had to introduce in this content type was an area for a client logo and an area for a client name. So the next one was news article. This one was a one-to-one match with our article content type. So we really didn't have to do anything on this one, but just bring it in and say, hey, yes, it's a match. We don't really need to do anything in order to bring this over for Experience Builder. The next one is homepage and about us, not really, is homepage and basic page. So basic page already existed in Olivero. The only thing that we did is we rearranged how this would look and introduced areas for a card component, which is a new component that we introduced to Olivero, and these headlines. So these headlines were a new addition to Olivero for Drupal CMS. As you can see here, the basic page is just like the article content type, except now it supports an area for our new card component. And then finally, we have profile. Again, this is pretty similar to an article. The only thing that we really introduced was this new area here, which locks up in a profile image with a title, phone number, and an email address. So those are the big content types that we had to introduce or design for Olivero for Drupal CMS. And I am going to hand it over to Alycia to talk a little bit about the components that we created.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name is Alycia Jones. I'm a senior UI designer at Lullabot, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well. Okay, We good? You can see my screen?
Mhm.
Okay. So I was brought into this project a little bit later in the process. We already had priorities of what needed to get done first. And so by the time I came in, the content types were pretty much laid out that Jen just showed. And I was focusing on making the new components for Olivero for Drupal CMS. So I came in with this list of like, we need these components and reuse as much as you can from Olivero. And so I'll go through some examples of like varying levels of adoption that we use for certain components. Some of them, they just needed small updates. Some of them were using some functionality, but had a completely new UI or new styling. And then some of them were brand new, but we tried to reuse different styles and elements as much as possible. So the first one I'll go over is testimonial, because this one was a pretty easy lift. We needed a component that supported a quote with a tagline, a name, a role, a call to action, and an image. And we already had a pull quote in Olivero, so kind of similar to a testimonial. So we used this component and revamped it to work for testimonial. So that looked like this. So still using the same quotation graphic off to the left here. We're still using the same grid structure as well. We just shrunk down the text style, added the name, the more link, and the testimonial image as an optional image field. So this one was one of the pretty easier components to implement. Next level up of that for complexity was for FAQ. So we wanted to do an accordion for this component with the question. You can expand it and see the answer. I'm sure you've seen that a lot on the web. So Olivero already had these collapsible forms that were basically accordions. And so we repurposed the functionality here, but stylistically, we wanted to update it to match the UI a little bit better. So that turned into looking something like this. It's using that header component that Jen mentioned. We're using that at the top here. And then we have the accordions here, which are styled to look completely different, but it's still functionally similar to these collapsible forms. And then the next stage, I wanted to go over this global intro header because we ended up reusing this a lot. So this was kind of a new, somewhat of an element level component that we developed for Olivero for Drupal CMS that we were able to reuse a lot in all of these pattern headings. So we reused it for FAQ, profile list, image grid, statistics, and card group. So we've got a lot of mileage out of this one. And then lastly, these are all the new patterns that we developed. So I'll kind of go through one by one, and then I'll pan over and show you all the different elements that we were using from Olivero. So here's our card pattern that you saw in Jen's content types. Really tried to adopt the UI and visual style of Olivero as much as possible. We also have a profile list. This one, we did decide to introduce a slightly new card because a 16:9 image that's this large for a picture of somebody's face is not ideal. We wanted to do a little bit smaller, 1-to-1, so that we made this one for the profile list. We also created a promo component and again made it very similar to the cards, but just made it left and right 2-column design. We also had an image grid here. We're reusing the aspect ratios that were in Olivero already. And statistics, this one was also a new one, but we're using the header component. And lastly, we had a new hero image. We wanted something that was like really big and impactful that you could put at the top of landing pages that had the option to include some text and some call to actions here. So we created this new hero component. And so I'm just going to zoom out a little bit because over here you can see all of the reused elements and styles that we used from Olivero throughout these components. So of course, we're reusing type styles, so all the heading styles and body styles are the same. We're also reusing all these Olivero colors, so didn't have to do much heavy lifting as far as picking color choices. And then some element level stuff. So we're reusing Olivero buttons, reusing the aspect ratios that were already built into the system. The tags were very similar, and then this new micro content heading component. So that's kind of an overview of the new components for the system. I don't know if I want to pass it back over to Jen or if we're ready for questions. Is there any more to go over?
I don't think so. We reserved time for Mike to go through some of the front end stuff, but he hasn't joined yet. So
Yeah, well, I guess we could open it for questions then. It looks like we've got a couple in Q&A.
Well, let's talk about a little bit the intentionality behind a lot of this, because I know there's been a lot of strategy work and things to go into that priority guide, and like how did we land on those components? Why those components, type of thing? Can we provide any insight onto why we offered those? Why did we choose these and not other, for example?
So I think there's specific audiences that Drupal CMS is targeting. Like one of those is a marketer. And so the idea was to figure out like, what are the things that marketers would want an experience builder that would help them very easily build the type of site that they need. And so I was not involved in those conversations. That was like higher level Drupal CMS leadership when they identified these different personas and what Drupal CMS would be created for. And so when it came down to like the components and the content types, it was more of what are the things that are missing from Drupal CMS that a marketer would want to build out, like a client website, right? Or a website for their company. And so those are the things that I think, those questions that helped identify the components and content types that needed to be included that weren't supported by Olivero at the time.
I would add there, I wasn't involved with the decision making at all either, but just judging off of the patterns that were chosen or the components that were chosen to put into the system, I think part of it was also what are components that are super common on websites in general that can get a lot of mileage and they can use in a lot of different ways. So trying to introduce components that we knew most people would want, or that could be reused in many different ways. So FAQs, cards, you see those a lot on all websites. They're kind of common components. So wanted to make sure those were available in the system as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know this is community effort as well. And it's definitely not just Lullaby doing this, but we do have a lot of people contributing and engaged with the community. Was there anyone else specific besides Mike that you all work closely with, and what some of their contributions were?
Yeah, we worked a lot with Christina. So Christina is the UX lead for Drupal CMS. So Christina Chumans, she's also from Lullaby. And so she kind of helped guide some of the things. And when it came down to a question of like, hey, can we include this new component? It was like her being like, yes or no, depending on the timeline. I'm trying to think of who else that we had worked with. So I think Pamela Barone is another one. And so she is I don't know exactly what her title is with the Drupal CMS project, but she's a product owner is what it is. So she's a product owner for Drupal CMS. And there are times when she came in to like help make decisions and to make sure that like things were still on track. So so those are the people that, at least from the design side, that we had interacted with. I think there was a couple of conversations where Mike Plunkett was brought in to kind of help clarify some of the priority guides and some of the decisions that were made around those, so we had a better understanding of like, did we really need to include this, or is this really required, or where does this display? So
All right. Well, all right, last chance to get some questions in right now. Or you can reach out to us in any of our social channels later, but if you want an answer right now, now's the time. And I'm not seeing anything come through, but thank you both for this. Everything looks great. Excited to see what's coming down the pipe. And let's see. Yeah, any final words?
Oh, I think one of the things, well, I say no and then I still talk. I think one of the things that was great about this project is we have been talking about adding cards to Olivero for like 2 years and it just never got done. So it's one of those things where it helped push us to like, hey, like we need a card component for Olivero for Drupal CMS. Let's create in a way where we might be able to contribute it back into Olivero for core. So I think a lot of the ideas that came out of this project, you might see some major improvements with Olivero in the future. I think it just depends on like how much time everybody has and how much of a priority it is now that like Drupal for CMS is going to be released. So
I can add on to that too. Olivero, we were able to put some effort into revamping the design system in Figma as well, because that the design system for Olivero, the original one, was made in very early Figma days. And so it wasn't using the latest technology with like variables and component builds. And so we were able to improve upon the design file for that. If people ever go and access that, we actually have a published component library that people could utilize instead of just more of like a documentation file. So that was nice too.
Oh yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Cool. And I should say that Lulabot and Jen in particular was also a part of the initial push to get Olivero into Drupal core. How long ago has it been now? It feels like forever.
geez, it was like 2020 or 2021. It was,
Okay.
I think it was 2020. So
Okay.
I remember because it was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And everything was a bit on. So
Yeah. So the 3 years of that 1 year, that felt like. Yeah. But yeah, so when she says that she's been wanting to put in cards for Olivero for a while, it's been since the beginning. So yeah. Oh, someone asked. Oh, we did get a couple questions. All right, the stalling tactic worked. So, are these going to be included in Olivero or installable as a theme we can use with D10, D11 sites that are not built with CMS?
not at the moment.
Yeah.
And I say that because all of our focus has been on just supporting Olivero for Drupal CMS. I think to contribute these components back to core, I don't know. And again, I'm not a front-end developer. I have no idea like what Mike's front-end developer focus was. But I do know that like in order to contribute back to core, it's a rigorous process and things have to be coded a specific way and it has to go through specific reviews. And so I think because that's a longer process and we need to get this done more quickly, I think maybe that in the future, especially with cards, because that's something that we had talked about, you could see those in the future. I think that some work needs to be done in order to contribute these components back to core still. So
I think, and people can prove me wrong but I think these are also based on recipes eventually. And so while the recipes might not be part of Drupal core, I think it'll be relatively easy to install or find and install. So that's the intent, is that Drupal CMS will have extra recipes by default, and those will eventually be available to use. Now, however that interlinks with Olivero remains to be seen. And is the URL to the design system available?
So I think we could share the link to the Olivero design system. The Olivero for Drupal CMS is not like technically a published library of components yet, because we were working so quickly. We just needed to get designs done and developed. But I think that the Olivero design system, we used to have an Olivero theme that was a public file that I did label it as deprecated. So this new design system file would be a better place to look for things like components and elements and things that are already in the system. So I think that I can share a link to it right now. It's view only. I think you should be able to sync it to your projects. But if you guys have issues, just let me know.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. And again, if you have any more questions, just reach out to us. We'll do our best to answer them. Thank you all. Appreciate it. And we'll call that a stream. Thanks.